I'd like to introduce my co-presenter, Sabeth Fitzgibbons. She's one of our extraordinary board members at TENS and a rector of priest in charge at Trinity in Seattle. Sabeth, welcome, and tell us about yourself.
Thanks, Davey. I'm really excited to be here. This is my first year on the TENS board, and one of the first things I've gotten to do. So this is great. I have been a priest in charge of congregations for a little over 10 years. And I have been in charge of congregations from small, semi-rural to where I am now, which is a larger urban congregation. And I find that the stewardship challenges are pretty much the same everywhere I've been. So I'm glad to be here to talk about implementing the TENS materials. I've had some really good success with them in the past, and I'm excited to share this year's campaign.
Thank you, Sabeth. And Sabeth just celebrated a birthday yesterday too. So happy birthday. Thank you for being here with us on your birthday weekend. My name is Davey Gerhard, and I'm the Executive Director of TENS. I came on right in the January of 2020, right before the world changed. And what an exciting time it's been to lead stewardship efforts across the church. I'm really grateful for your participation this morning. While there are 82 of you currently on today's call, we had almost 200 people sign up. So we'll be sending out lots of emails later with all of the materials today. We have people from just about everywhere. We've covered the continental US, from Olympia to Southwest Florida, from Texas to Northern Michigan and North Dakota, from Maine to San Diego. Pretty amazing. Thank you for being here. We also have folks from Alaska and Hawaii. Thank you for waking up extra early and being on this call. So we're really excited to present this material. With that, I'm going to dig in and get us started. This morning's learning objectives, we're going to be talking about the theme that we've picked for the year, more than enough. We're going to go through some slides about how to talk about money and faith. Now, it's already sort of a hard conversation to talk about money in polite society. And we know that there are taboos on talking about faith and religion in polite society. And yet here we are talking about both in one morning. So we're going to give you some strategies on how to encounter those conversations. And of course, we're going to talk about the resources that we've created this year, which are specific to 2022. And we hope address sort of the general mood and the feelings and the challenges and opportunities that this year presents in faith-based fundraising. Finally, we are here to answer your questions. So don't hold back in asking them in the chat window or by raising your hand. Our theme this year is more than enough, and it comes from, since we are in year C, the Gospel of Luke, it comes from Luke's story of the feeding of the 5,000. And we remember that not only was everyone fed from the miracle of the loaves and fishes, but there was an abundance afterward. There were leftovers, baskets full of them. And for us, and for each of us as Christians, this miracle is so central, because it's what happens when we bring our gifts, our time, our talent, our treasure, and we share them with the world. They are then broken and distributed to the wider community, just as the loaves and the fishes. We never know where the miracle of our sharing will go, and it will go towards feeding and nurturing our communities. This is a beautiful tradition into which we step. Our theme, and this is a quick overview of it. I encourage you to download this year's theology statement. It's a one-page theology statement that you can use in your church, just to sort of introduce the theme. Why are we talking about more than enough this year? And what might your congregation need to know about that? But this is really for us as we emerge from some isolation, as we encounter the world afresh. post or mid-pandemic, whatever era of pandemic we're in, we're taking an inventory of everything that we are, who we are, what we will become, and we're thinking about the future. And as we do that, we realize that there is and always has been more than enough people, more than enough time, more than enough money to do the work that we need to do. Now, it might not always feel that way, but this is the story that we tell about who we are and how we are. We're going to be talking about the four kind of milestones that you need in a pledge campaign. We're going to talk to you about implementing a great campaign using the tools, both from our annual pledge campaign, but also from the resource library. We've collected over the years lots of articles, lots of teachings, videos on stewardship. So check those out. They are all on our website and free for you to download. We're gonna talk about how to utilize your social media and your newsletters to make sure that everyone in your congregation is connected to your campaign this year and ready to participate. And invite people, you might do, I know we're all tired of Zoom, and I thank you for being here on Zoom today, but you might engage in some small groups this year around your stewardship, or if you're ready and able to gather in person, do that, and that's really a beautiful thing. And finally, we're going to invite you to reflect. We give you weekly reflections that are matched to the gospel of the day on Sundays, September through November. And that's really a tool to help you unlock a stewardship theme in each week's readings, so that as you're moving through your campaign, you can keep the conversation going. Let's start off with a reminder about one of the most important tools in pandemic era fundraising. And I think, as we all have come to understand, it's really the future of fundraising in the church. We must understand and get good at virtual fundraising. It's just no longer usual for individuals, visitors, to carry cash. If I came into your church as a visitor, and there wasn't a way for me to make a gift online, you would very likely, despite my intention and joy to give, you wouldn't get much from me because I just don't carry a whole lot of cash anymore. I use my phone or my debit card for almost everything I do. So this is increasingly the case as we encounter church. And so we must find ways as a church to engage virtual giving. Receipts and engagement are automatic when people make gifts online, and that's a really important part of this as well. We always need to acknowledge and give people both the tax credit that they need, but also the reminder that their gift is well placed, it's well intentioned, we're using it for the right purposes. So please take advantage of the various kinds of virtual giving that are out there. TENS has done a lot of work over the years on showcasing the platforms that are most commonly used in churches. You can find those webinars on our website and our webinars page. And they side by side compare most of the available platforms, tell you about the costs, tell you about the benefits. And so take a look at that and make a decision. It's not just our youngest generations that make gifts online. It's all of us. So people in the group 40 to 59 are the largest group of online donors. That might surprise us because we usually think it's our millennials and our Gen Z folks who are digital natives making the gifts online. But it's increasingly an older crowd as we understand and as virtual giving comes to us. Faith-based giving has grown hugely in the last 2 years and will continue to grow. 59% of donors 66 and above have made gifts online. Now that's an old statistic. I haven't updated this slide apparently for 2022, because as the pandemic went on, that 59% of 66 and above has gone to 86%. 86% of people 66 and above have made gifts to charities online. This tells us that they know how to do it, obviously, they're connected, and that they're comfortable, increasingly comfortable using their credit or debit cards to make online gifts. This is a really important distinction, and it helps us understand that we should be doing this too. If we're not inviting or giving people the ability to make a virtual gift, we're leaving money on the table. Janelle reads into the chat that she knows of a congregation that pauses during the offering to invite folks to pull out their phones and make a mobile contribution. That is an incredible opportunity. If you put a QR code or a link in your bulletin and allow people the opportunity to use their phone and go and make that during the offertory, make that gift, it's just a natural thing to do. I've seen this done in all kinds of ways, including one church that put in their bulletin, we know you all use your phones in church anyway, so why don't you do something constructive with it and make a gift? You know, have some fun with it, but also make it something that we can rely on, something that people will use, because it's an important way to make people aware. And we need to find the way to bless those virtual gifts that come in. We hold up the plate filled with checks and cash, but we don't always say, and look at all of the online gifts that have come in, because we don't have that real-time data when the priest is standing behind the altar blessing. But we need to acknowledge people have also made recurring gifts. There are gifts coming in all the time to church that we also need to raise up and remind people that these too are blessed by God.
Hey, Davey, can I jump in while you're
Yeah,
talking about
please.
virtual giving? So one of the things that happened at my church during pandemic and was that we found ourselves getting much more direct about our invitation to give, because suddenly we were all virtual and live streaming. And so it was hard to make that connection with people. And so I found that as we have started to regather in person, we still have a lot of people attending virtually. And I still make that really explicit invitation to use our virtual offering plate. And we print a QR code and text to give information and a link. So whether you're online or with us in person, there's a huge number of ways. And all of those take you to the same place in our giving software, all those different entry points.
That's great, Sabeth. And I'm so glad that your church has implemented that. You are a witness to us all.
It's fascinating to me how much easier it is to say those things, having gotten in practice.
Yep. It's another way to reinforce that it's okay to be explicit in asking, because it's an expectation, right? It's an expectation. It's one of the things that we gather in church to do, to bring our gifts so that they can be shared. And it's a really essential part. You know, early in the pandemic, we were talking about, don't forget the offertory. Just because there isn't a plate being passed, and maybe early pandemic, you weren't even meeting in person, but don't forget that moment. Don't forget that moment where we, you know, virtually even come down the aisle and present our gifts on the altar. It is such, the stewardship guy thinks that's one of the most important parts of our service, but it really is, because it's our gifts and they are being given freely for the world. Thank you for bringing that up.
I see a couple of questions in the chat.
Great.
Noting Susan asking about our software. You know, I think there's a lot of vendors that will do that. And the key is to find a vendor who has those options available. You can also create a QR code just with a random QR code generator online. That doesn't take any special software or programming it. You just use the website you want to direct people to.
Great.
In Maryland, it's an observation about not passing the plate. And people are doing that.
Definitely. Yeah, we find ways to do it. You can place your money in a basket at the front of the church or at the back of the church, lots of ways so that we don't have to pass something back and forth and pass our virus along with it. So ways that we can be kind to each other and keep the giving going. Thank you for all of that. The other benefit of virtual giving and virtual stewardship is that there are no limit to the number of different platforms you can implement. So you might be a PayPal or a Tithely or a Vanco. You could use all of those. You might use your Venmo. You might use Cash App. Who knows? You might use Zelle. You might have people direct check from their bank. Any of those things, and as many of them as your office administrator and your treasurer can accommodate safely. We don't want to overwhelm them with too many platforms, but the more ways you can offer people to make gifts online, the better. This is also donor, so this is called donor-centric fundraising. And it's something that more and more nonprofits certainly have been practicing this for decades, but churches are starting to learn that just saying, we have a pledge and a plate and a check, and that's how we like our money, isn't enough anymore in a world where there are more and more options. So making it possible and easy for the donor, the member, to make their gifts is something that's really important these days. Before we leave virtual giving, I want to talk about the fact that some churches might also do events. And I know that the pandemic has really made event-based fundraising difficult, simply because we don't all want to be inside in the same room and have that gala that we might used to have had back in the old days before 2020. So you can do all kinds of events on virtual platforms like Zoom or other things. And you can create as many different options as you can. If you have and rely on event-based fundraising to cover some gap or to fund outreach ministry, please don't stop doing that just because you might be limited in social distancing. Find the way. There are tons of platforms out there that can help you. And there are, in the next slide, a way to do it for virtually no cost. You can run an event using free software or things you have easy access to and not spend, the hundreds or more on a fancy platform. You can even do silent auctions. You can do all kinds of things that make it really easy and really fun. So I want you to know that if you are the kind of community that relies on event-based fundraising, there are lots of virtual ways to do it. And it's also a part of our stewardship. So take a look at this. TENS also has a webinar. You can find it in our library, specifically on virtual events. And it runs through the common platforms, helps you make the decision on what the costs are, what the benefits are, and how to implement them. So take a look at that deep dive on event-based fundraising that we have. Before we move into the next set of slides, I see there are a couple of questions that have come in. Janet transitioned to Vanco. Great. I'm so excited. Sabeth doesn't even know this yet. TENS just signed a contract with Vanco to have a special for all congregations that are members through their diocese to get special rates using Vanco. We're going to be talking about that in the coming weeks. Vanco is an incredible vendor, a great opportunity, a good way to raise money online. So congratulations, Janet, you are ahead of the curve there. PayPal, I want to talk just for a minute before we move into the next set of slides. I want to talk for a minute about the fees, the transaction costs of online giving. They exist. So there's the first hurdle. Yes, there are fees to raising money online. And I know because my own vestry did not implement online giving until the pandemic forced them to, that the fees were the block, the stopping point for our treasurer and our finance committee for a very long time in accepting virtual donations. Because there's a 3% or a 2.7% or a whatever cost per transaction. And I'm just saying now that I think it's a cost of doing business in church. It's one of those things we need to factor in. The second good piece of news is that PayPal included offer you the opportunity to cover that transaction cost. If you're using PayPal for charity, and it exists, it's the same system, but a different login method. If you are using PayPal for charity, there's a toggle that says the donor will cover the 3% cost. And so that's not passed on to the church. So you can say to your donor, if you want to make $100 gift to the church, it might cost $103 for you to do that. And then the church will get all 100 rather than taking that 3% off and only getting 97 into the church, right? So there are ways to do that and ask the member if they're willing to make that gift virtual and then to cover the cost. And there are lots of other ways to mitigate it. But I think the important thing is to just know that it's part of it. You will see an increase in your giving that will offset the transaction cost. And that's just the way of the world right now. Virtual giving is increasingly important and more money. So here's a little statistic. Average gift size, if you are asking somebody to write a check, average gift size is $55. So that's if I need some money for a great idea. Will you give my charity some money? The average check is 55. The average online gift is 103. So this is saying that if you ask somebody to make that emotional, immediate gift, you're likely to get double the amount in your ask than if you have somebody stop and think and have to pull out a check and a pen and figure out what to do with it. Now, that's not saying we're predators or anything, but it's saying that average gift size is larger than check. And so it pays for itself to have virtual giving implemented. So I'm loving that there are lots of experiences in the chat. Thank you for putting them in of using Tidely, Vanco, PayPal. These are all great platforms and they're making church possible right now in the pandemic. Great. Sabeth, will you lead us through some of the pastoral challenges that we face when we talk about money? And then after Sabeth finishes, we're going to pull us into the big room and give you a chance to ask some questions before we finish up.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Davey. Thank you for taking us through that great introduction. So it is true, this is a year like all years when there are challenges when we ask people to make a pledge and when we talk about money. So here's some things to remember there, and I will add in my own anecdotes as I can. First of all, there is no shame in a household pledging less this year than in other years. Every gift matters, and pledges can be adjusted. And while some folks may still be struggling with life and incomes, other families are not. And so there is also the opportunity to ask other folks to increase their pledge. Every conversation we have about pledges is a pastoral one, and especially if you're asking congregation member to congregation member, there is I think it's important to be sensitive to people's responses and their situations, which goes to the next point on the list about checking in with your clergy and following up. So often clergy know of people's financial situation, changes in their financial situation, particularly if someone's lost a job or had a death in the family or had some other major life change that might impact their ability to give at the same level they gave previously. It is a good idea to have your clergy take a look at your list of folks that you're going to be contacting before you contact them. I know I usually have 2 or 3 people that I say, I've heard from them, and let's not let's not ask right now. Or let's keep our ask at the level of every gift is important, no matter how big. And then the other thing is, if you are talking with someone and you hear them say, I know that we're moving, I know that my spouse's job is changing, or they're getting laid off, or something, that that is important information to share back with your clergy, because that is also pastoral, needs pastoral follow-up.
Before you go on, Sabeth, the question came in from Arlene. I was wondering who was going to ask it, as it comes up always. Some rectors don't want to know what parishioners give, and other rectors do. And some communities have different cultures around who knows what about whose pledge and things like that. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your own experience and maybe have some advice about what rectors know and what they don't.
So I've been in churches that had both of those policies, and I can see the benefits of both sides. I can see the benefit of not knowing who gives what, and the benefit of knowing something about it. I choose to know more on the pastoral side. It's not a priority for me to know who knows who's giving exactly how much, but I find that it does help to know if somebody's pledge decreases significantly. And again, I wouldn't need to know the dollar amount to know that. Or if somebody is able to give a significant gift, I think that's important to think as well. So, and to know, yeah, it is definitely a conversation for communities. I see Janice's comment.
Yeah.
The rector doesn't need to know the amount, but who is pledging? Yes, that is, and I guess, thank you, Janice, you have encapsulated what I was trying to say. Yes, I don't think that your clergy need to know amounts necessarily, but to know who is pledging and if there are significant changes. And clergy often know about pastoral situations that might cause a significant change. And if they don't, they should.
Absolutely.
For the pastoral follow-up.
That pastoral follow-up is what's, I think, really important, Sabeth. And, you know, I trust my priest with all kinds of very private information, right? They know lots about me. I may have confessed, I may have, whatever. So I trust my clergy to have good boundaries about the things that I share and to help me make a best choice going forward. And I think it doesn't change with money. For me, this is me speaking about my relationship with my priest and pastor. I trust them with all kinds of information. Why not also with my money? And I think that we as lay people in the Episcopal Church need to remember that our clergy are trained on good boundaries. They have good boundaries, hopefully, that this is one of the things that they understand about confidence. And it's our own stuff about money often that says, I don't want my pastor to know, but you might tell them that you are having marital problems, or you might tell them that you're having a breakdown at work, or that your relationship with your children is going wrong, or whatever. Really deeply personal stuff. Money is also deeply personal. And if I feel free enough to talk to my pastor about all those other things, I also should feel comfortable talking about my money. It's that last boundary, I think, that we ourselves need to be able to trust our priests with.
I see Alberto's question as well about members who give consistently but don't pledge. That I will tell you, that's a question we're having in my congregation right now.
Yep.
How to invite those folks, how to remind them of the importance of pledging.
I think it is, Alberto, I think that it is really important because it's the way that we budget. It's really important for us to know what what we're expecting them to give. And if you saw our webinar earlier this year on intergenerational giving, we've got to face the fact that millennials and Gen Z may never fill out a pledge form. This is not going to be the future of the church. And so the church probably has to start figuring out how to anticipate giving based on data, based on communication with our members about their intentions that doesn't involve paperwork. And so I think it's both. I think we need to educate people about how our money is raised and how we account for it. But we also need to respect the fact that there are some people who are never going to sign a pledge form. In my church, we take a look at that as stewardship committee members, and we say, well, this person doesn't ever fill out a pledge form, but they give this amount every year. So can we count on it again? And sometimes we even say that to them. You don't fill out a pledge form, but we noticed that you give this amount. Can we count on that this year? Or are you intending to support the church? So there are other ways besides a piece of paper that we can build out our budget.
Right.
Lots of comments coming in about this.
Lots coming in. I think Davey, I think can we just keep moving through the slides?
Yeah, let's move to the slides and we'll come back to this.
Yep. Yeah. Because here they're keeping on. All right, challenges. Yes, we are having challenges. This slide could be written for my congregation this week. Keeping our conversation focused on mission. There's a lot of anxiety in congregations about what's happening, what will happen next, how will we recover. Every clergy person I've talked to recently from around the country is talking about people. For the most part, people are not back in pews. Giving is not at the levels it was before. We're starting to look at our budget for next year and how's that going to look? And there's a lot of anxiety. And if the clergy are managing their own, there's still lots more oozing out of congregations and finance committees and treasurers. So take a deep breath. Deep breath. All right. The work of the church has not changed. What we are called to do as God's people and people of faith in our communities is still there. And in fact, it might be more needed than ever. We may have fewer financial resources, but we still have people. We still have passions. We still have ministries that are meeting people's needs and meeting needs that might be more dire now than they were 2.5 years ago. We will be okay. And we also know that what we feed, like where we put our energy, the things that we feed are the things that grow. So in my congregation, we are really talking about choosing to focus on mission because that's what we want to grow. If we focus on our anxiety, that is what will grow. And we will just get deeper in that hole of scarcity thinking. So mission, folks, we need to talk about our mission and the things that we're doing and that we're excited about. And how we can do them together. There's a good reminder here that if we received a PPP loan, that was an installation. And in my congregation, those were applied in 2 different fiscal years. So we've had 2 years where those monies came into our budget and helped balance things that a lot of our congregation may not be aware of. There are no more PPP loans coming.
No.
So we now really have to apply ourselves to focus on the challenges ahead of us. They are not impossible. As there was on the very last slide, we survived before, we will survive again.
Yep.
And there may be some folks in your congregation who are able to make extraordinary gifts right now. But we may need to ask them and not just assume that they will intuit that.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Sabeth, that, maybe we all have that member that we're saving for the capital campaign, or, that there's something big coming down the road. And we're going to ask them then for this big gift. We might know, I mean, yesterday the stock market took an interesting trip, but in general, there are still a lot of appreciated assets out there that people might be sitting on some money, some ways that they could make incredible gifts to the church. And so this may be the opportunity to say, I know I've been saving this person for the leaking roof or the new Sunday school room or whatever it is that we want to do, but this might be the moment. So as we engage that thinking, really weigh that out. There are some people in our congregations that might be able to help us out. Janet asks, what are PP loans and SBA? Remember back in 2020 when the government was handing out money to protect our payroll, and that really insulated churches. Many churches took advantage of that, and it was really a safety net. Why we talk about it here is because it reminds our congregants that we are good fiscal stewards, that we're taking advantage of the programs that are out there to keep the church running, that our clergy, our treasurer, our vestry, they're really deeply thinking about how we can keep things going. And so this is a good indicator. If your church applied and received them and then went through the business of getting that loan forgiven, it's good stewardship on the part of our churches to have done that. It shows that we're caring about this and putting our fiscal responsibility in. Thank you for that question.
Mm-hmm. All right. In times of uncertainty, talking about stewardship, it is about our hope, our Christian hope for the future, our hope that is based in our belief that God will not abandon us in a time of need, and that our strength is in being a community, and that we walk together, we share one another's burdens, and it is by continuing walking together that we will get through whatever challenges in front of us. And while we may not know what church looks like in 2.5 or 3 years, because God knows we didn't know it would look like this 2.5 or 3 years ago, we have survived and we will continue on. There is pledges can be changed. That I always think is a good message to share with people. If your financial situation changes during the year, if it goes up or if it goes down, you can always change your pledge. And particularly if you're giving a percentage of 100 is different than a percentage of 80. A percentage is just a percentage. It's not a hard number. So that is another thing to remember. I know in my congregation, this next point about making gifts from securities, received several gifts from securities in the last few months as people are finding that their investments have, until recently, been performing better, and they need to make some disbursements, and they're directing some of them to church. And I appreciate that, where their giving might not be their month-to-month giving might not be able to change much because of a fixed income. And thank you, Davey, for this bottom line. The most important thing to teach is that all giving matters. I would rather have some commitment to give from every member of the congregation than to have fewer pledges for more. It is that step of prayerfully deciding to make a commitment at some level that you can afford. And hopefully others will be able to afford more.
Yeah, exactly. Someone said earlier in the chat that it's a discipline. Giving is discipline, and it's a practice. That's another nicer word for discipline. It's something that we have to learn, and then once we do, it becomes second nature to us. It becomes a practice and we get better at it. And 100% participation in fundraising at church is one of the things that I think we should really be aiming for. And it doesn't have to make, you don't have to break open the piggy bank to do that. Any gift matters, and we really need to stress that. It's not just the upper gifts that we need, it's everybody's giving, because then we all have something, we're all buying into this mission then.
I did see a good note in the chat about reminders to people for year-end giving. That is always, I think that is another one of those money on the table moments that we sometimes forget about, that when people are making their year-end gifts, to remember the church in that for an extra gift as well.
Yeah, let's take advantage of all the things we've learned from our nonprofit brothers and sisters. And your alma mater, they are asking for year-end gifts, they're asking for planned gifts, they're asking for recurring donations. So the church also, if we don't ask, we won't receive.
Exactly.
There's a scripture about knocking and
Yeah.
asking.
Exactly. Creating strategies for difficult topics, creating safe spaces to nurture all voices, but keep any one voice from dominating. That can be challenging, especially if you have one dominant voice that is very anxious. So be sure that you work with your clergy, and clergy work with your lay leaders. If you know of or can anticipate a strong voice that likes to dominate, on some techniques for how to make sure that everyone has a chance to speak. Those are out there in lots of practices about how to run, especially how to run meetings. There's almost always some guideline about how to set that up. And the point about silence, giving people space and time to process, and in conversation to leave some quiet time before cutting off a discussion of a topic. Some of us need a little more time to think about what's been asked and how we want to respond. True for introverts, also true for folks who are a little more neurodiverse. Keeping things positive. Doesn't mean it has to all just be just fine. It doesn't have to be all sunshine and roses, but we do need to focus on what we can do, what is possible, how people can contribute and make a difference. If you're having small groups, to remember to train facilitators that leaders don't have to have all the answers. It is okay to say yes. Wow, that's a great question. I hear you. I don't know the answer. I don't know if anyone knows the answer, or maybe it's something that an answer exists and you just need to find out. But right now, especially to affirm that it is okay to be uncertain, because none of us really know what's ahead, but we will get there together. That's why we are in this conversation, because we believe that we are walking together in faith and with God. This is one of my favorite slides. Hold on, I'm seeing Sonia's comment about introverts. Yes, important to not ask for instant decisions for introverts. Yes, I agree with that.
Yeah, that's so important when we're asking for a gift, whether it's stewardship or a capital campaign. It's not a hard sell, right? It's think about this. I hope that we're encouraging people to pray on it, sleep on it, talk with your family about what kind of gift you can make. Have it around the dinner table. Ask your kids to get involved in what our gift to the church will be this year. So when you hand them a stewardship packet, if you're doing a face-to-face or a small group meeting or something, it's not a hard sell. I need to get an answer by the end of this meeting. Here's the pen. It's a pray about this. How can we help you? How can we support you? So thanks for that, Sonia. We need to take time to make decisions.
And
that's
I think
big work.
when we look at the materials in a few minutes, you'll see the pacing on the timeline does allow for that kind of advance time to process. All right, appreciative inquiry. I love appreciative inquiry. If you don't know about it, it is a model of thinking that focuses on what is possible, what is good, what is exciting. It is appreciating the things that we already know and have discovered about ourselves. And it purposely does not ask negative questions or frame problems. This is another piece of that where we put our focus is where our energy will all go and what will grow. So this is a solutions-based, inclusive way to engage in conversation, and it can be used with people of all ages. So you can use it in small groups and in large groups, but I know that our inserts for the campaign this year have questions on them that are intentionally appreciative. Questions like, what ministry of our congregation is most hopeful or most exciting to you, and why? If money were no object, what service to our neighborhood or our neighbors would you hope to begin, and why? What are some examples you can name of other nonprofits or congregations that are doing remarkable work in our community, and why is that inspiring? And the one that we're leading to, which of your gifts are you most willing to share with our church? And right now we're not talking about money, we are talking about time, skills, passions, and why? Why is that important? So values.
Yeah. I love these questions. If you are a church that uses godly play as your Sunday school curriculum, your kids are doing this every week because their answers all begin with "I wonder," and the answer is also "I wonder." It just keeps open. And it's such a gift that we're giving a generation of kids that are going through godly play, that they're not being drilled with answer, stress, decision, but be open to the possibilities. That's what this is about.
Yeah. Yep.
Amy, I see your question, and we're gonna go through one or two more slides. We're gonna bring everyone together, and I see that there's a need for us to talk about what the rector knows. So we'll hit that question in just a minute.
Okay. All right. And here is, I read these through and thought these were really useful. So some framing about how to actually make that ask when it comes right down to it. And these are framed as like face-to-face questions. So for someone who's been giving steadily and you're asking them just to renew their pledge. Susan, this year we are raising more money than ever to fund our youth program, outreach to elders, and help our community. Mary and I made our gift to the campaign. Will you join us in supporting the campaign this year? One thing I like in that question is that it talks about the impact, the mission of the church, the things that are happening. It encapsulates that, why would I give? Well, we're funding our youth program and our outreach to elders and our whatever we do to support our community. And it says, I'm doing this, won't you join me? The increase question, Jonathan, my spouse and I increased our giving this year because we want to see our congregation grow. Can you make a stretch gift to the campaign this year? Again, why should I do this? And why should I join in doing this? For someone you know is having financially tough times, Dick and Bill, your giving to our church has been so faithful all these years, and I know it's been a tough year for you. Still, I'm asking you to make a gift to our pledge campaign, no matter the amount. Will you do that? That acknowledges that it might be a hard year and that the amount doesn't matter. And for someone new, this made me think about a new family that we're welcoming. Cindy, you and your family are new to our congregation. Are there questions I can answer about why we raise money through pledges, or how you can join us. In the Northwest, the Episcopal Church is often a magnet for people coming from either Roman Catholic churches or evangelical churches. And the idea of pledging, particularly for folks coming from a Roman Catholic background, is a new one. So that's opening the door to ask questions and understand is important. I see Amy's question about different ways to make the ask. These can be as in letters, targeted letters. If you know enough about your givers in your congregation to be able to target letters this way, I think they are also effective if you're making a face-to-face ask.
Yeah, different congregations do their giving in different ways. Some congregations employ every member canvas or a small group dinner church or something like that, where the host might hand the packet and say, will you join me? Or here's your packet this year. They don't know what's in it. It doesn't say an amount, or, it's not asking about the amount. Notice none of these questions says, will you give me $5,000 more this year than you did last year, or whatever. It's all about that. So some face-to-face, if you, as Sabeth says, some congregations have software that enables them to write the kinds of letters that says, last year you made this kind of a gift. I noticed that. Would you make this gift this year? Some churches do that, like our nonprofits often do. Not every community is comfortable with that, and so they do it in different ways. All of these are great tools in helping you as stewardship leaders get used to the idea of asking people for money, because that's what we're doing. At the end of the day, we're asking people to share their gifts of time, talent, and treasure with us. And as Sabeth pointed out, every one of these implies that I've made my gift, and now I'm asking you to join me. This is so much more of a compelling ask than just saying, please make a gift, because it says, I've already done this. I care about this. I'm doing it. My family's done it. We've done the work. Now will you join me? It's more authentic when we've made our gift first. I always ask the stewardship committee, the clergy, and the vestry to make their gifts before the campaign started. They should not be the ones that are straggling. They should make their gift right up front so that we can say when we launch, hey, we have 100% participation from our leadership, and we're asking you to invite us. So I really like that. I'm going to stop sharing the screen for a minute, and we have a lot. You guys are asking great questions, so thank you for that. I'm going to bring us into the room where Sabeth and I can go through the chat and take a look at some of the questions that you've asked, and also invite you to raise your hand. And if you have a question that we haven't covered yet, go ahead and ask us. You've got time, and we've got time, and we want to make sure that that you do that. I do want us to start with perhaps the conversation about who knows what about pledging. And I've seen every model. I worked with a congregation in the Diocese of California, which is where I'm located, where the pledge secretary, bless her heart, has been pledge secretary for 45 years. And she keeps all the stewardship information in a locked file cabinet, and no one has the key. So, okay, that's a community that has that value around secrecy of the pledge, and nobody has access to that. I don't know what will happen when she finally retires or when God calls her home, because she knows it all and it's locked up. So, okay, that's one model, and it works for that community. They've been making it work for 4 decades. There are other ways that we might look at that and figure out how pastorally to do that. I know some of my pastor and priest friends say they hate stewardship time because they see dollar signs when they look out from the pulpit, and that makes them feel like the wrong, they didn't get into it for that reason. Yet our gifts are the way we support ministry in our church, and it's an increasing inevitability that we need to get better about talking about giving so that we can help our congregations work. It's more expensive to run church every year. It's more expensive to work in our communities every year. And our communities are more fragile every year and need more from the church. So that means that we're in a place where we need to keep engaging this conversation. And as the spiritual leader, it's my opinion that the priests need to be involved in that and know some things. But I'd love to hear what others have to say and talk about that. Yeah, Bill, I see you've got your hand up.
Well, I put one out. Our church makes fairly good use of the qualified charitable distribution from IRAs. And another one, since I work with a community foundation that we're working on, that churches should probably use, are legacy gifts.
Yep.
We're able to survive as a church because a lady left us $250,000 20 years ago. And we've been able to invest that money and grow it. And without that, with all that's gone on, our giving's actually gone up during the pandemic.
Yeah.
But we're seeing fewer and fewer members, and we're an old church. So those are challenges.
That is right on trend with the church right now, Bill. You know, we are seeing larger gifts from fewer members and from older members who are giving from their, the pandemic had some great movement in the stock market, some forward movement in the stock market. And so giving that was tied to market performance, such as qualified minimum distributions and other things from retirement accounts, saw a great increase. So if your treasurer and your vestry and your stewardship committee doesn't know how to handle a gift from a retirement account or from a security, make sure you're linking with your diocesan finance team to ask them how to process such a gift, what to do. The acknowledgement you send is different if it comes from, for example, a donor advised fund. A person can't make a pledge from a donor advised fund. They can only make a grant. And so your letter has to reflect that. So there are certain ways to deal with that and the tax implications. So if your treasurer doesn't already know that, your diocese will know how to deal with that. So make sure you do that. Retirement giving is keeping a lot of our congregations going while our families are catching up with inflation and with the pandemic disruption, with the great migration and movement that we've had. So please encourage retirement giving. It is so important. And also acknowledge that it has limits because it is retirement giving, because those assets are fixed. And so we need to be encouraging our younger members to step into that role. Finally, Bill, your invitation about legacy gifts, and David, I love your example of this $100 million gift to a university. When we ask people to share of their great wealth and make a legacy, it is an honor, and people honor us with those gifts. Often we don't hear about them until they've passed away, and then we're surprised by these bequests. So much better if they can make them or acknowledge them in their lifetime, and we can thank them and welcome them and expect and appreciate what they will leave us. Let's see, there's some other questions that have come into the room. How do you manage a pledge campaign in a church that needs to be able to pay a permanent priest? Yeah, so Sabeth, do you have any wisdom on that?
Well, paying permanent priests is part of the mission, right? It's part of enabling the church to do its mission. It's not all of it, because the mission of the church happens through every member and everyone who comes in contact with us, but certainly being able to pay a regular clergy person who can be there and present with you at all times is releases some of the anxiety of volunteer members who may have been holding things together. And again, this is talking about the things, you know, focusing on the things where we put our energy is what grows. And so I hear in that, Christine, some real concern for the future of the congregation. And I would encourage you to focus on the mission. What is it that your church is doing that is exciting, that might be more enabled by having a clergy person who is a regular employee of the church?
Thanks for that question and that answer. That's beautiful. Sonia, before we get to your question, I see your hand up. I want to answer Gary's question in the chat. If you haven't seen the TENS webinar on breaking through the pledge plateau, we offered that last year, and we can offer it again if there's interest. Certainly. Developing our donors. Now, that's not something we often talk about in church. Our nonprofit brothers and sisters are definitely talking about what's called moves management. You move people through a donor cycle, and through more involvement and more asking and deeper conversation, you move people in increasing their experience with your congregation and the mission so that they make ever more impactful gifts. We don't tend to think about this in church because it wades deeply into that uncomfortable territory of money and faith. But it's helpful when the vestry knows, here's a new family and they're making a gift now, and we're seeing them grow in faith and involvement in the church, and we're seeing their giving grow. How can we give them more opportunities to get to know us, more volunteer opportunities, more support for their family, more services, so that they continue as their income and ability grow to make ever more impactful gifts to the church. It is the business side of fundraising, and our churches are about human development as people in faith, increasing our faith. And one of the ways that we express that is by increasing our contribution to the mission. So Gary, I really appreciate your nod there to developing our members and helping them. It's discipleship at the end of the day. It's really helping them understand how to participate in the mission. So thank you for that. Love it. Sonia, I see you've got your hand up and you've been patient. So come on off mute, and we'd love to hear what you have to say.
So we came from a place where we weren't even paying our DPA, and our pledging dropped way off, sort of in response to some leadership stuff. And we've not quite doubled our income since then in pledging. And we got a new leadership. But what has been more helpful, I think, is that in the COVID, people got really wanting to be helpful to others. And so our outreach ministries increased. We added a food pantry and so on. But part of it is it's really visible. I mean, on Saturdays, you just see this whole plethora of activities surrounding the church, and 4 or 5 different things going on at the same time that are giving. And then we got engaged with our neighborhood association in Portland, Oregon. We have neighborhood associations. So, so now we're in a position where people in the neighborhood actually see what we're doing. They're not members of the church, but they send us random gifts. And just that visibility, I think, has also inspired the members, because giving went up. And we also attracted new members as a result. People wanted to come and join in that. And part of the reason I wanted to do this year with the abundance is because I was feeling that in terms of, because of the visibility of our ministries, we also attracted volunteers that aren't members of the church, that help serve in the food pantry, that help serve in the hot meals, that help serve in the thrift store, which I run. And they're not members. They don't necessarily intend to become members, but they want to join in what we're doing. To me, it's God working through them. I don't care whether they claim us as a member or not, but they're serving God in my eyes. And it speaks to the mission that we've been able to proclaim. And that's really led us to this abundance of people helping and also more income. And I'm not saying that there's no financial stress, because we're still, because we've grown, we also have some more expenses as a result. But we do pay our full DPA now.
Good for you.
And our budget has gone up significantly, and we're trying to make a big leap this year. So I really felt like the message of abundance would speak to where people are right now. But the whole legacy thing, we need to get more on that. We haven't done enough on that, I think.
Well,
So
good for you. TENS is having a webinar in October on revitalizing and reinvigorating your legacy society. So come back and we'll talk to you about that in October. You've said so many great things though, Sonia. And I think, to me, one of the things that is most important is the way that during this acute time of need, you were able to listen and respond to the community, and the community heard you and paid attention. And that's that rising tide floats all boats idea, that the more is there, the more people want to be a part of it, the more visibility, and that you have community coming in and offering gifts and perhaps becoming volunteers, perhaps learning more about your community, maybe one day joining you on a Sunday. But as you say, that's irrelevant. It's important that they feel a part of your community and cared for. All these are great things. When we started the pandemic and our doors first closed, I wanted to remind us all that the church was open, even though the doors were closed, and how we responded to our neighbors in that acute moment of need is going to be how our neighbors viewed us once we asked them all to come back. And this is a really important thing, that if we shuttered up and stayed scared inside and didn't open our hearts, then our community noticed that too. Sonia, it sounds like your community really noticed that great things were happening. This goes back to something that Phoebe Griswold put into the chat earlier about how people at their coffee hour are giving shout outs to each other and to the community about great things that are happening. And that social time, that formative time where we love each other as family over our cups of coffee after the sermon, is a great opportunity to keep that thanks and also that acknowledgement of the ways that we might not just be connected to our community through church, but through nonprofits, through civic organizations, through raising a good family and keeping them, involved in the community. All those things that we do are a part of the values that we share with each other, and acknowledging them in each other. Hey, you're a really good mom. You're raising your kids really well. Or I love the way you always go to the school board meetings. Or, thank you for volunteering your Saturdays at that nonprofit down the street. They really need your help. All those are great ways that we bring our gospel values back into our community and talk about it. So thank you, all of you, for putting that mission first. Good stuff. I see the Wilson family has asked how to engage non-givers or newer members who may not have come from a family that pledges. And there was an earlier question about how to deal with people who've never pledged before. I think I'd love to hear what Sabeth has to say. I think this is always an opportunity to educate on why we do things the way we do, but then I'll also say, and listen for the ways our members want to give. Again, we can't just say, write a check and put it in a plate. We have to listen to them too, because the church is a changing. So Beth, what do you say about how to engage non-givers or new members?
I think there's two pieces. One is definitely education about, how this system works in our churches, and that it helps our vestry be able to plan a budget for next year. I mean, that is the most practical purpose, is that pledges help the vestry anticipate how much money we can spend, how many people we can pay, how many, whatever. But the second piece of it is then also listening, and learning about the generations, because as Davey's pointed out, younger generations are not necessarily going to make a pledge, but they're going to give to things that are important to them. So if you're doing something that's important to them, they will just give. If you're hosting a homeless shelter, or you've opened a food pantry, or you're working with a nonprofit or a school, and preparing backpacks of school supplies, or those are the kinds of things that younger generations who might not necessarily make a pledge, they're going to give money to that, because those are things that they find worthy. So listening for what it is about whomever you're talking to that's new and hasn't pledged before, what's important to them about church and your congregation and your mission, might also help you find a way to invite them to give. And maybe they won't make a pledge, but maybe they will give generously to the things that are important.
Thanks, Sabeth. I think you're right on with that. Keep talking about the mission. Focus there. All right, I'm going to get us back in. I see there's a question saying, please don't forget to cover the TENS resources this year. So I'm going to spend a few more minutes doing that, and then we'll have time to come back together and answer any last questions. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen now, and we'll continue on with our presentation here. So this year, you have weekly inserts. They are in English and in Spanish, as are all of our pledge campaign materials. We relate these to the gospel, mostly the gospel. Sometimes if the gospel is particularly challenging, the writer will have picked one of the other readings from that Sunday. But by and large, it's from the gospel of the day. And we're doing this from September 11th through November 13th. So that whole sort of pledge campaign cycle from September through just coming up to Christ the King. So these weekly inserts, they can be put into your bulletin. You can use them if you're doing small groups to talk about your pledge campaign. If you're doing a rector's forum or any kind of education, adult ed, you can use these as a little theological tool. And then they pose reflection questions. And this goes back to that appreciative inquiry piece. When you get people asking and answering questions about the mission, particularly how the gospel unlocks that in them, they surprise you, and it just opens their hearts to what's possible and why they're being called to focus on the mission. So we talk through this. This is a diverse group of writers from across the country, lay and clergy members. So we've got some great September ones coming up. Our October readings continue through the Revised Common Lectionary and move us toward All Saints, where we focus on the Beatitudes, and then we end it with the promise of abundance. These are great reminders for adult ed. You can use them on your weekday potluck if you have a little discussion afterward or a small group. These are meant to engage conversation. So I want to go through the timeline. And as Sabeth said, we try to focus the pacing so that you have enough time to do this work and it doesn't feel rushed, but not so much time that it feels like, is this church doing anything besides talking about money? Because we know that there's a certain threshold that we can encounter. So we try to keep it nice and tight, but give space. So about 4 weeks before your campaign, the clergy letter should drop, and that if that's in mail or in email, TENS gives you a format for a clergy letter, a senior warden letter, and a stewardship chair letter. Those are in Word so that you can adapt them and put in your own context, or you can run them as they are. So at 4 and 2 weeks, those letters should go out. Those are priming the pump, getting people to talk about wealth, works, and wisdom and how we share it. And it's getting us ready for the theme of more than enough. Also, 2 weeks before, at least, test your online donation platform. Make a $1 gift and make sure that it's working. You might have set it up last year and haven't touched it in a while. It's a good time to say, let me take through the whole donation process online. Does this still work the way I want it to?
Make sure your thank you response says what you want it to say. And you've updated everybody's names if you've had changes in leadership.
Yep, so important. Just make those. A lot of donation platforms give you these auto responders that you type in once and forget about. So if you've forgotten about them, take a look at them and see if they still say what you want them to say. If they're talking about 2020 or they're talking about the former priest, thanks you for your gift. Make sure that that's updated. Thank you for that reminder. When you're getting ready for kickoff, that last letter from your campaign chair should drop going out, and you can send, if you're sending a packet with the pledge card, maybe you're putting in a budget, maybe you're putting in a brochure. See our webinar on designing for impact if you have questions about how to make a great fundraising and stewardship brochure. We have lots of ideas. We also have a tool in our resource library on creating great online donation forms, making sure that you're walking people through the process logically so that they get to that button where they can hit submit. So if you're using pledge cards, we give you a template, but if you're creating your own, don't forget to also ask about time and talent. So it's not just treasure that we're asking for all your gifts. Make certain that there's something on there that they can say they've either included the church in their will, or they would like information about estate giving, or if they intend to give through securities or other methods, so that your treasurer and your stewardship chair can respond appropriately. You might also include your case for support or your brochure. If you're doing a budget or a narrative budget, you might put that in with that letter. Every week during your campaign, for however long it is, and I suggest that a campaign goes from between 4 and 6 weeks. That's kind of the sweet spot. Any more than that, and it starts to feel like a slog toward the finish line. Shorter than that, and it feels like we're not taking it seriously. So spend some time on it. Give those weekly inserts a chance to do their work. We give you prayers of the people so that you can use those in your liturgy. We give you a hymn that we have a writer in residence who composes us a hymn every year. It's a gift. So you can use that, change it up a little bit, put that into your liturgy. If you're doing small groups or a rector's forum, discuss those weekly inserts or discuss the mission of the church. I love when congregations use testimonials, that every week during the campaign, members talk about, this is why my family gives here. This is what we love about this community. This is why we support. So make that a part of your liturgy as well. After the campaign, and I saw lots of comments in the chat about this, those thank you notes are absolutely necessary. Yes, your treasurer will send out the necessary tax advice and an acknowledgement. If they've made a gift online, they might get an auto letter from you. But then taking that final moment to handwrite, or if it's just too much to handwrite, to type up and personalize at least the name and your signature, make sure everybody gets a thank you. I like to say, even if they didn't make a gift, but they pledged something else, say, we're glad you're a member here. We're glad to see you every Sunday. And thank you. Thank you for all that you do.
Davey,
Yeah,
I have often asked my vestry to take a role in writing thank you notes, not giving out pledge amounts, but just who pledged. Because I feel like the vestry is responsible for spending the money. They should have some part in also acknowledging how it comes in.
yeah. Share the joy of writing thank you notes.
You bet.
Vestry. And it's a beautiful connection piece. Janelle, I see you've got a question about resources for narrative budgets. We have a tool in our resource library in the best practices and tools section that'll help you take your Excel spreadsheet budget and turn it into a narrative budget. So we've done some of that work for you. There's also a great tool with Episcopal Church Foundation and their ECF 360 stewardship package that has a fee to it. But if you subscribe to that, they have an actual calculator where you type in your information and it produces a narrative budget for you. So there are some tools out there on how to create narrative budgets. I think they are a beautiful way to talk about that. See our whole article in the TENS resource library about narrative budgets, what they do and how they can be used. Finally, make sure you evaluate your campaign. This is the last thing people want to do after they've worked hard on a campaign and it's Christmas and they just want to be done with it. But take that time, maybe in January, to bring people back, bring your committee back one more time and say, how was it? How did it feel to you? How did it feel to the congregation? What feedback have you heard? How did we do? And it's more than how much did we raise, but how many people made gifts? How many new people gave? What kinds of increases did we see? Did we notice any trends? How can we get ready for next year? Because that's also really important. It's going to come back around, so let's evaluate it. We have a great webinar on how to evaluate a pledge campaign and how to take a look at what happened and how to get ready for next year. So visit our website, download the annual pledge campaign, and your secret password is, if you haven't heard this from your stewardship folks yet, is Luke 9:17. That is your one-stop shop for getting all the materials that we have. I'm going to bring us back into our group, and we have just a couple minutes left. If there are any last questions, I want to make sure you have a time to ask them.
I see two things in the chat. David asked about whether there's a recommendation to set a specific dollar goal for a pledge campaign.
I love that question. And, you know, I think it depends on your culture and how people react to those kinds of things. Sometimes goals can be really motivating, especially if they are reasonably set and achievable. If it's a goal that is really hard to, if you're, you know, doing a big increase, or please don't have a thermometer ever. I know that they are fancy and exciting, but it's so hard to see that slowly go up. And if it never gets there, or if you actually don't finish collecting all your pledge forms until 3 weeks after the campaign ends, which is how my church is, by the way, then that thermometer never shows its exciting moment. So goals can be great and motivating, but make sure that they are reachable. And maybe have a goal about participation. Families households that gave, you know, that is a really exciting measure. So I think that is a really great way to do that. I also saw a question about Prayers and quotes from the Bible on giving and stewardship. Yes. We have in our formation library a whole thing on Bible studies, parables and quotes from the Bible that you can use in your stewardship program, and then some questions, a Lectio Divina kind of way to get through a whole bunch of passages from the Hebrew scriptures into the epistles and the gospels that deal with money and stewardship and stuff. I always like to remind people that Jesus spent 40% of his ministry, 16 of 40 parables, talking about money, stuff, possessions, and things. That's a lot of time that our chief prophet and Messiah and Savior spent dealing with money and stuff. So why is that? So if we follow Jesus and we're thinking about this, we understand that our congregations might also need to hear from it more than once a year. I know that we are at time, but Louise, you've got a question, and if folks can stick around, I'd love to hear what you have to say.
I know that we're shooting for 100% participation, but realistically, what's considered an appropriate ratio between the number of members and the number of pledges?
Well, you know, again, that depends on your context and your history. I mean, I think we should always, as you say, we should always aim for 100. Not every family will participate, but I think you need more than 90%, right, to really achieve that budget. Of course, that depends on all kinds of things, right? You might have that one super gift that really makes your budget, and so that's an important one. And then other people, if they, anyway, it all depends on your context. But I really think we should just keep coming back to 100% participation is our goal. You'll know if you're not getting there and what then you need to do to motivate people to do it. So I think it's hard to give a ratio, but keep going. Janice.
Yeah, so we are in a transition period. Our rector left in May, and we do not have an interim. We're still praying on that one. So as senior warden, would it be appropriate for me to write technically the rector's letter? Or, I mean, yeah, I'm like,
Yep, you're the ecclesiastical authority. Welcome. So,
oh God.
So definitely, I think step into that role and ask your junior warden to write the senior warden letter, however that works. Yeah.
Thanks.
Are there any other questions? Your questions today, by the way, have been great. Is there anything we haven't addressed that we absolutely need to make sure we get before we release you to your Saturdays?
There have been several questions about the slides. And so just a reminder that Davey will share those, I believe, afterward, a link to everybody who registered for the webinar.
Yep, we'll get them out to you today, the recording and the slides and some links to everything we've talked about. While we're talking about links, I put a couple things in the chat. I'll put it again. We have another webinar coming up this year in October on planned giving and legacy societies. Register for it, please. We ask you for your feedback. It's 4 questions on a little digital survey. If you could fill it out and let us know what you liked, what you didn't like, where we could improve, what you'd like to see in the future. We look at that, and we'll be meeting at the end of September as a board, and we'll be taking a look at our feedback and planning next year's webinars. So let us know what you want. And please sign up for our newsletter. We only send one a month, and it's usually to update you on new resources, articles that are inspiring, and upcoming trainings. Thank you all. I want to take just a moment to acknowledge that the work of stewardship is a blessing and it's also really hard. And so I appreciate that you are stepping into this ministry, that you are called to it, and that you are doing such wonderful work for the church and for the people of God. Thank you. And thank you to my wonderful, amazing board member, Sabeth, for spending her Saturday morning with us too.
Thank you, Davey, for preparing everything and making it so easy. This is the gift that TENS is to the church. So thank you.
Thank all of you, and thanks for all that you do. Have a beautiful. Thank you. Friend.
You can say happy birthday to Sabeth as well.
Birthday, Sabeth. Go spend your day off Zoom. All right, thank you, friends. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you.